Really, don't stop, carry on. No, please, no, don't. No, that was a joke. Oh dear me. Well, hey, welcome to Salt or Elements, the series in which we're looking at mental and emotional health and how that impacts on our spiritual walk. Tonight's topic is on fear. We're going to be looking specifically at where fear comes from and how to get rid of some of your fears. But first, it's time for a story. One morning, several years ago, I found myself trying to find a faster way to work, as I did most mornings. Only this morning, I found myself going down a street I'd never been down before and stuck at an intersection trying to turn right. It was a T intersection, and as I looked across the intersection, I saw a brand new townhouse. It'd been there maybe 6 months, and standing in the second-story window of this townhouse was a naked man. He was naked, he was nude, he had little to no clothes on, and I thought to myself, yuck. I do not want to see that. And I thought to myself, probably the people walking past do not want to see that either. Now, being a bit of an activist, I thought, I'm going to put this right, I'm going to call the police. And I thought, hang on, before I call the police, I better get my story straight, okay? Because maybe this guy wasn't dirty. Maybe he was just, I don't know, like getting changed, and he didn't notice, he didn't know that people could see him. And so I kind of glanced up again reluctantly, and it took me a few seconds to work out the man wasn't a dirty man, or at least if he was trying to get the dirt off, because the man was in the shower. He was in the shower. Now, his shower, you might be wondering, why is it looking out over an intersection? Good question. And as I looked around the edges of the glass, I could see that it was frosted, and I kind of put two and two together. What had happened was the architect or someone who designed the bathroom had decided to let more light in by making the wall of the shower out of frosted glass, not accounting for the fact that when frosted glass becomes wet, it becomes transparent. And so this man, and possibly his whole family, had been showering naked in front of the whole intersection for approximately 6 months. I didn't call the police, but when I got to my work a few minutes later, I said to my workmate, I said, mate, you'll never guess what I just saw. She said, what? I said, a naked man showering in front of an intersection. She said, oh yeah, I know. I see him every morning. How's that for a morning routine, eh? What are you doing? Oh, I get up, have some porridge, go see the naked man on the way to work. And I wasn't going to have this. I mean, this was not cool that this guy was, doing this. So I got a pen out, a piece of paper, and I wrote the man a note. Dear man, did you know that when your shower wall becomes wet, it becomes see-through? It's not a good look. And I took it over there, and I didn't knock on the door. I thought that would be a little bit embarrassing. I folded it up, and I put it in the letterbox and drove off. Now, how many of you, if you went out to clear the mail and you received that letter, how many of you would be just absolutely over the moon to receive such news? In fact, here's my real question. How traumatized would you be, honestly? On a scale of 0, perhaps, to 100, right? 100 being you would just literally die, and 0 being, I don't really care, and go take another shower. Where would you be on that scale? How traumatizing would it be? All right, I want you to find out a score. I'm going to ask you to raise your hand. Who would be in kind of like the 0 to 20 margin? Couldn't really care less. All right, thank you. Hands down. Who would go 20 to, say, 50? Yeah, oh yeah. 50 to 80. And all the honest ones, 80 to 100. All right, hands down. 80 to 100s. The thing is, when you get up around 90, 95, 100, you could definitely develop a phobia. Phobias are irrational fears. They're not supposed to make sense. If you go online and have a look at all the different phobias, you'll notice that some of them probably shouldn't be there, like there's a phobia of being beaten repeatedly with a pipe. What's irrational about fearing that? Who isn't scared of that, right? So my question for you this evening is this one. What do you think would be the worst irrational fear or phobia to have? You got 5 minutes.
I think the worst fear to have would be the fear that while you're asleep, the insides of your pillow have been replaced with the insides of animals. And whenever you wake up, it's just going to be like a soft, gooey, warm mess of animal parts. And it's just going to play on your paranoia, and progressively you're just not going to be able to sleep. Your life will just become worse and worse and worse.
I reckon the worst fear would be being the last person to survive a zombie apocalypse. I mean, the last person left on Earth and looking around, seeing nothing but yourself, and it just terrifies me. Me and a couple of friends, we have plans and evacuation things everywhere we go. We look around, we're ready to go, and it's just, it's terrifying.
Right, now phobias are pretty bad news. I'm sure you found some pretty scary ones on the lists in front of you. I'd love to know what you came up with there. But I want to suggest that there is a fear that is way, way, way worse than a phobia. You see, when you have a phobia of, say, latrophobia would be one example, which is a fear of otters, right? I mean, what do you do? How does that change your life? I don't think it does. I mean, when was the last time you were walking down the road and a truck full of otters overturned? Came running towards you. Doesn't really happen, does it? If you have a phobia of flying, you just don't fly. Or you, I don't know, take a boat or walk or something, right? If you're scared of the dark, what do? You leave the light on. But I want to suggest there is a phobia way, 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 way worse. You could fear an emotion. Now you're in trouble. Because if your fear is of a feeling, if it's of an emotion, then you are only ever milliseconds away from feeling that feeling, of experiencing that fear at any time during day or night. It only takes one message on your phone to say you're not coming to the party, or I don't want you around, you're not my friend anymore, or something like that, to be confronted with a terrible fear. You know, if it's rejection, there you are in the midst of it. If it's missing out, man, then you are only seconds away from someone coming up and saying those 5 most toxic words of all. You should have been there. So today I want to talk about unbearable feelings. Unbearable feelings is a term that was coined by a New Zealand therapist called David Riddell, and he worked out after thousands of hours of counselling that one of the biggest problems we face as human beings is that we've said that some emotions are off limits. We won't cope. They'll kill us. We've said that some of them are just on our most hated list and we must avoid them at any cost. And that creates all sorts of issues. Well, I want to answer a couple of questions for you. Where do these unbearable feelings come from? And secondly, how do you know if you've got them? So question number 1. How do you develop an unbearable feeling? Well, much like a phobia, they are born out of trauma. Most of the time, an unbearable feeling comes along because you're a child between the ages of, say, 3 and 8, and you are overwhelmed with loneliness, rejection, humiliation, missing out. You name an emotion, you can be overwhelmed by it and not have the, emotional coping skills to cope. So then you're in trouble. Next time, you're on the lookout for this emotion and you don't want it to come about. It's probably like this. Imagine if someone came up to you and punched you really hard on the arm, and now you've got a massive bruise under your hoodie or under your suit or whatever you're wearing, your jersey. And what would you do? You'd probably shelter it from people. You wouldn't let them go near it. You'd go to a party and you'd keep that bruise away from others. An unbearable feeling is a lot like an emotional bruise. You don't want to feel that emotion again, so you kind of go to extreme lengths, irrational lengths, to hide it from others. I spent my teenage years with an unbearable feeling of missing out. Those 5 words, you should have been there, were crippling for me to hear. How did that come about? Well, I'm the youngest in a family of 4 boys, and so some of you relate to this, I got sent off to bed before everyone else did. And so half an hour of lying there, listening to the rest of the family enjoying themselves. No, you can laugh, that's great. Yeah, no, feel free. And so it was just so traumatic, and you're listening, the whole family's enjoying themselves without you. So that's where they come from. They come from some kind of trauma, wetting your pants in front of the class, calling that teacher mum, or whatever it is. How then do you recognize that you have an unbearable feeling? Well, what you're looking for, people, is an overreaction. You're looking for anger would be the most common one, or sulking. Anger or sulking, some sort of overreaction. You're looking for when you are most childish. When are you most childish? When are you most trying to avoid the situation you're in? When are you most irrational? There's every chance that in those moments, what you're really trying to do is avoid a certain specific feeling. And so next time you get angry, ask yourself this question: what emotion am I trying to avoid by getting angry? Good question. To talk more on unbearable feelings, here's Belinda.
I've never had a client yet, in fact I don't think I've ever met a person yet who doesn't have at least one unbearable feeling, usually more than one. The thing is, we all experience emotions, right? We're human beings, we can't get away from emotions, and sooner or later a traumatic experience is going to get connected to an emotion, and our brains will say that emotion is so disgusting, so revolting, so terrifying that I'm never going to experience it again. And that happens to all of us at some point, so we all end up with an unbearable feeling. Unbearable feelings can cause all sorts of issues. In fact, you name an issue, an unbearable feeling can cause it. For example, if your unbearable feeling is conflict, then you will do anything to avoid it, which means you probably won't challenge people, you may not speak up in arguments or disagreements, you'll just avoid anything that could lead to conflict. If the feeling you're terrified of is rejection, you probably won't let yourself get close to anyone. And if you do, if there's any sign that they're going to reject you, you will run a mile. If your unbearable feeling is powerlessness, then you're probably going to become a control freak. You will control the people and the circumstances around you to make sure that they cannot control you. The good news is you can absolutely get rid of an unbearable feeling. What I normally do is I ask my clients, what do you do to avoid this feeling? What are your standard ways to stay away from whatever that feeling is? And then I ask them to stop doing it as much and start to get used to it. But they need to be able to reassure themselves at the same time, because their brain is still thinking like a child when it comes to that feeling. When something triggers that feeling off, they just go back into kid mode. So they've got to be able to say to themselves, you're an adult now, you can cope with this. This is just an emotion. It's unpleasant. Yep, nobody likes this emotion, no one in the whole world, but it's not unbearable. In fact, there are hundreds of people, thousands of people around the world experiencing this emotion at any one time, and they can cope with it. So you can cope with it too, and that's the secret. You've got to be able to reassure yourself that you can cope. Life is absolutely amazing when you get rid of your unbearable feelings. Imagine a life where you are not wasting your time, your effort, even your money trying to avoid certain feelings. There is so much more freedom in that. In fact, my personal definition of what good mental and emotional health looks like is when you are no longer afraid of any person, any circumstance, or any emotion. I've got to say that again. It's when you are no longer afraid of any person, any circumstance, or any emotion.
So these unbearable feelings really are a really significant part of our life. They kind of take us on a certain course, whether we want it or not. It's kind of like, depending on how many unbearable feelings you've got, you're driving down the highway of life and you have to swerve wildly to one side to avoid this feeling. And then here comes another one, we better swerve wildly into the next lane. And so they're not pleasant. The biggest problem with them, of course, is they tend to be very subconscious. Chances are, sitting here tonight, you don't even know which feelings you find most toxic. But we're going to give you 5 minutes to have a good think, a good old chinwag to the person next to you, and answer this question. Which emotions would you put on your most hated list? Go for it.
Probably the feeling of being corrected. I hate the feeling I get when someone comes up to me and says, I just need to have a quick word with you, and I just suddenly freak out and I can't breathe, and I get all these panic in my head, and it's pretty awful. But then pretty quickly I can talk myself out of it, and usually it's fine. Usually I'm not getting told off, but that's the immediate thought that comes to me when someone comes and wants to have a quiet word with me.
I would say probably feeling inadequate. So if I sense any kind of situation where I'm going to feel less than, or really, really insecure, or like I'm not going to be able to achieve something or that someone has asked of me, then I'll avoid it. I'll maybe not say yes to it if someone's asking me to take on that responsibility, or I just won't go to that place or get myself into that situation or talk to that person, because if I feel that sense of inadequacy, then it's not good.
So what do we do with the emotions like grief or fear and those ones? As followers of Jesus, what do they really mean? And I think one of the reasons why I think Jesus died on the cross, and this is just one, there's numerous reasons why Jesus died on the cross, but one reason why he died on the cross, I think, and the reason why he is my saviour, is because when my life is crap and my life is difficult and my life is hard, I know there's somebody who understands, because I know there's somebody else who has suffered. And for me, I know that there's somebody else who therefore walks with me. And I think this is what we understand from, this is the beautiful picture of Jesus, the Christian God, because Jesus has walked among us and Jesus has suffered in lives worse than we can understand. We feel anxious about our future. We feel anxious about what's happening around us. We live in deep fear. And as followers of Jesus, it doesn't mean Jesus takes the fear away. It means I choose to find courage in Jesus in that fear. And I reckon as followers of Jesus, we no longer talk much about courage. And I reckon courage, it's a Christian virtue that we should recognise in our lives that, yeah, we are afraid. However, Jesus calls us to have courage. And we can take courage in the life of Jesus that facing huge adversity, he still chose the life he chose. And God ultimately set as part of his life and resurrected him from the dead to, in some sense, authenticate his life for all time and said this is the right decision he made. Yeah, I mean, maybe God should just come down and sort of wave his magic Harry Potter wand and, take away all the kind of things we're scared of and afraid of. But again, it comes back to this conversation earlier about character. And I think, for whatever reason, God doesn't seem to be able to wave his wand and make jellyfishes have backbones. How he does it is slowly allowing us to face difficult situations with him that build our resilience. Character is not a spiritual gift given from on high. It's a journey walked with Jesus daily that slowly builds our character and resilience. And so therefore, the adversity, the hard times, the fear, the difficult times, actually the greatest times of growth where we actually develop as who we are as people. And the gold and the gems in our life that have laid dormant get polished in that adversity.
I think the message we're presenting tonight's pretty clear. The more emotions that you say are off limits in your life, the more feelings that you will not face, the worse your life becomes, the more troublesome and difficult life becomes. The way to great mental emotional health, the way to enjoy life, is not to avoid unpleasant feelings, but to downgrade them in our minds. From unbearable just to merely unpleasant. And so that trauma in the past that maybe in childhood you were overwhelmed by a feeling, this is not that time anymore. This is a new day, a new time. Man, I hope you've really enjoyed this evening. I hope you've found something personally challenging, but that also you've taken away something that you can share with other people. Thank you so much for listening tonight. God bless you. Catch you later.